Okay, so today we're doing something a little different, not really something I've ever done on the channel before. So we've got a Lost Media tier list here that I've made with about 75 entries, mostly from the Lost Media iceberg. But I threw a few extra in there that I thought were cool. These, by the way, are basically the most interesting, or like the entries from the iceberg that I found the most interesting personally. And yeah, we're going to rank them in a tier list here, kind of like this is heavily inspired by what Wendigoon did when he finished that massive conspiracy theory iceberg. Kind of doing a similar thing here to end off the series, basically. Also thought it'd be some extra content in between some other bigger projects I'm working on that might take a bit longer, but yeah. Also, some of these have actually been found and some are still lost, obviously, and then some are likely like non-existent hoaxes because, I mean, come on guys, you know I love my rumors and hoaxes, okay? And the way I'm ranking these is based on how personally interesting the piece of Lost Media itself is to me, but also the story behind it. You know, the ongoing search, if there is one, the developments in the case, also like the mystery aspect of it all, right? That's like kind of, to me anyway, one of the best parts of Lost Media. I mean, usually, not always, but a lot of the time when a piece of Lost Media ends up being found, it's actually not all that interesting. It's more so the journey to get there. The hearsay about how disturbing it is and how it scarred them in their childhoods, or how it's so different from other like episodes in a show or things like that. That's what really fuels these searches and makes them so interesting. So that's why for a lot of these, the ones that aren't found end up being a lot more fascinating than the ones that do get found, if that makes sense. But I'm kind of rambling here, so let's just get into it. Also, I was planning on doing like 100 of these, but I realized I'm probably gonna ramble for quite a bit, so I think 75 is fine. But real quick, before we get into the tier list, let's talk about today's sponsor, Marvel Strike Force, the ultimate turn-based mobile gaming experience that lets you play as your favorite superheroes and supervillains from Marvel, recruiting characters from across the multiverse and the many, many Marvel movies, TV shows, comics, and more. Speaking of, new characters are coming out all the time. With this month, we've got the new Hivemind team, Silver Surfer and Ghost Spider, who are getting new symbiote versions. Pair them up with the other symbiotes like Venom and Carnage for maximum synergy. But there's not just new characters, but new items and new ways to battle being added all the time too, including during this month. And for a limited time, if you use the QR code or click the link in the description, you'll unlock exclusive characters for free by logging in. Celebrate the release of Marvel Studios Echo by unlocking Echo for free. So if you're ready to jump into Marvel Strike Force and assemble your squad, then scan the on-screen QR code or click the link in the description and use the promo code VENOMGIFT for these awesome rewards. Thanks again to Marvel Strike Force. Now back to the video. So what better way to start than with a day with SpongeBob SquarePants? So what can I even say about this, right? That hasn't been said already. Well, as you know, a lot of people have talked about this over the years, including myself, and blame it on Jorge, which that's who I discovered this from. He made that complete history video going over the search efforts and whatnot, and it's quite the storied history. I mean, El Supersonic Q even did an entire iceberg dedicated to this topic. There's that Bedhead Bernie video, which was one of the first videos talking about this, and there's just a lot to this story. It's more so the investigation and the search itself is interesting, whereas as we know now, it's not really a real piece of Lost Media. Like, they never made this film. But basically, if you somehow haven't heard this whole story, it was basically an unproduced mockumentary that was going to be a direct-to-DVD film, which was actually supposedly listed on Amazon and is associated with this DVD cover. And beyond this, the lore actually goes pretty deep. There was this filmmaker called Mr. Orange who was trying to actually make the movie, and apparently wrote this script and was trying to pitch the film. Then there was talks of like this studio or this theater being involved in a money laundering scheme. It was just crazy stuff. There was like all these legal concerns, you know, attorneys were getting involved, and basically the pitch never went through or anything, but eventually like 5 pages of a script were found. And yeah, it's just a really, really interesting story, but the concept behind the movie itself isn't that interesting, to be honest. But basically, it said on the official Regal Films website, it said, "In this mockumentary, SpongeBob lives above ground like all Hollywood superstars. Afraid that SpongeBob is becoming old news, his boss runs a contest called Spend a Day with SpongeBob. The contest makes SpongeBob the talk of the town as thousands of kids enter to win. The lucky winner is Seth, and he is ecstatic about his day with SpongeBob. However, the day becomes a roller coaster ride as things do not go quite the way they planned. So yeah, for this being such an iconic piece of quote unquote lost media, and honestly just having such an interesting like backstory and like search and all that, I gotta give it an S tier, right? I mean, it's just so iconic. You really just gotta respect it in that way. Okay, so now next we got Walt's Warning, I believe. Yeah, so this was an interactive Breaking Bad Flash game, which was released in like 2009 as sort of promotion for the second season of Breaking Bad, which at the time was definitely not as popular as it is today. Like, apparently the show didn't really take off till around like season 4 or something like that. That's what I heard. So this was a part of that whole like marketing campaign, and it was a weird game for sure, where players could submit photos of themselves, and Walter White would actually make videos about them, like burning their like pictures of their face. It was very, very interesting for sure. A bunch of footage was found, but the game itself has not been recovered, because it's kind of a complicated process with, you know, the whole Flash thing getting discontinued. But yeah, Bryan Cranston is actually like in all the videos doing all this interesting stuff, and in the game you can like look around with the mouse and like click on stuff in the RV, and depending on what you do, it will lead to like different videos playing out. So it's a really cool concept, and I really wish this game was actually found, but it's one of those things that can't ever really be recovered because it was like an online sort of thing. I mean, maybe it can. There was a file that was recovered, but it didn't like have the full game. But there is still an ongoing hunt for it, don't get me wrong. And obviously, you know, there's tons of, you know, voice lines and clips from Bryan Cranston that still haven't been found either. But I'll definitely give this one an A tier, because obviously I'm a big fan of Breaking Bad. So in case you haven't seen that Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul video, I ranked all the episodes. So yeah, we'll just give it an A tier for now. Okay, so moving on, we have the JoJo Phantom Blood movie. So this was a film that was released in 2007. It was an adaptation of the first part of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure manga, Phantom Blood. And this one is interesting as far as lost films go, because it is something that was actually shown publicly, at least in Japan. It was shown in Japanese theaters, and was screened back in, you know, 2007. With the last known screening taking place in April, I believe, and they started in like February. So there were quite a few screenings, but since then the full film has not actually been recovered. Quite a bit of footage has actually been recovered over time, and there's even been like partial recreations of scenes of the movie, right? But it is still only considered partially found. But overall, from what I've seen from the footage, it has some pretty good animation, especially, you know, for the time. And we do have other adaptations of Phantom Blood, and I do like JoJo, but to be honest, I think part 1 was my least favorite part. So, I mean, it's interesting, right? It's one of those things that a lot of people have been searching for a long time. So I will give it a B tier for sure. Definitely an interesting one. Okay, so next we got Meso Blues. This is quite an iconic piece of lost media, which is true about a lot of these on this list, because I basically chose ones that I personally was interested in or that were big in the lost media community, and this is definitely one of them. So this is a lost original short film about a like Elvis lookalike that was created by Van Partible, which was part of a senior thesis project in college that would later be the basis for the Cartoon Network show Johnny Bravo. There is actually very little footage of it, which was recovered from a documentary, I believe, or some sort of behind the scenes thing. And then there's like, you know, the screen cap that this is kind of associated with, which comes from that footage. And apparently Van Partible claimed in 2022 or around there that he actually owns a VHS copy of the short film, but he only shows it to other like animation like classes or to his personal friends. So it seems like this won't resurface anytime soon, although it definitely could. But yeah, this one's pretty classic, so I definitely gotta at least give it a B tier. Some people will probably rate it higher, but yeah, that's what I'm just going with for now. Next we got Slamfest 99. Oh boy. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of really iconic ones at the beginning of this list, I'm now realizing. This is like up there with like, you know, Day with SpongeBob and, you know, Saki Sanabashi and all these other like crazy big cases that everyone knows about, everyone talks about. So this was a Lost live stream that was part of a promotional event for the N64 for the original Super Smash Bros. So this promotional event was held on April 24th, 1999 and was at MGM Grand Adventures theme park in Las Vegas. And there was a 17-minute long fight that was apparently live streamed. But nobody has been able to recover this, although we do have descriptions of the event. A couple of these are posted here on the Lost Media Wiki article. I'll go ahead and read one out here. Mario and Donkey would start the match. Donkey Kong, being much larger than our favorite plumber, quickly took Mario out. Yoshi came in and got his revenge on the gorilla. Pikachu would come in for the monkey, only to be knocked down by Yoshi's lethal tail. Then before anyone knew it, Mario went crazy. He wiped out Donkey Kong, Pikachu, and his own teammate, Yoshi. Ultimately, the match would end in a crash, which knocked out everyone, resulting in a draw. Everyone's a winner, the announcer yelled. There are a couple screenshots, and along with the description, it definitely seems like an interesting thing to watch, and I would definitely be interested in seeing this. And a lot of people feel the same way because there is a very dedicated search for this thing, and we got the Lost Media Wiki on the hunt search flyer right here. And yeah, people have just dedicated a tremendous amount of time into looking for this thing, and unfortunately it has not yet panned out. But there are a bunch of photos that you can look at, and yeah, it's just a really interesting story. And yeah, where should we put this? I know I'm ranking stuff so high already. Might have to adjust stuff as we go on, but for now this is, oh man, this is an easy S tier, right? It has to be. It has to be. Next we got Smile Dog. Okay, so this is in reference to the original unedited Smile Dog images. There's a really kind of an interesting saga with this. I feel like I've talked about it at least once, but I feel like I've talked about it multiple times at this point. I definitely talked about it recently though with the cursed images iceberg thing. But yeah, one of the original images was found for this image, although the other most recognized Smile Dog image has not yet been found. And I don't know, there's not much else to it other than that. It's just kind of a similar case to Jeff the Killer, with people trying to investigate these old creepypasta images, which I'm all for. I'm a big fan of that. You know, I grew up listening to these kind of dumb creepypastas, so there is some nostalgia there, definitely. But other than that, there isn't much to it, so I kind of have to give it, I'm gonna give it a B tier, just because, you know, a lot of people probably won't find it that interesting unless you're somewhat invested in the creepypasta era, I guess. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Kekrok is next. This thing is definitely interesting. It's a very weird, like, Lost Media hoax type situation. It's more of a joke than anything else, but it's made its rounds in the community for sure. It's supposedly like this Sega Genesis game with this like really low quality like "Hey, I'm Kekrok" thing, and it's like some generic platformer or something. Yeah, not much to it, but it's kind of funny. And yeah, it's not real, unfortunately. So since it's so well known, I can't really give it anything lower than a B. I feel like I think it can live in B tier for now. And next we have, oh my god, why did I even put this in here? Okay, so Frivolous Fairy Tales. This thing is not that well known of a case. At least I don't think so. I think I mainly put it in here because it was the first ever piece of Lost Media I ever talked about in my first Lost Media video, which I made on Found Media in 2021. And it's basically like this like CGI children's show, which was like really obscure and it didn't have many copies of it that were made, but it was eventually uploaded to the creator's YouTube channel, I believe, and it can still be viewed there if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, if you want to check out the pilot episode of Frivolous Fairy Tales, go ahead and do so. But honestly, there's not much else to it other than that. I mean, Yeah, since it's a piece of found media, there's not really much else to it other than that, so I guess I'll just give it a C tier. Next we have Big Bug Man. So Big Bug Man was a canceled animated film that was being worked on in like the mid 2000s. And it was notable because it was the last performance ever done by Marlon Brando, obviously an iconic actor, right? Super well known and high regarded. And that's mostly what it's known for, honestly, because Brando was going to play this role of some type of old woman, I believe. And unfortunately, you know, he never got to fulfill that because he died during the making of the film. And the film never released. It was delayed multiple times, and then the project eventually went unfinished. But it was basically about an employee of a candy factory who becomes a superhero called Big Bug Man. But not much else is really known. There's a couple news pieces and other deep dives looking into it. There's like a main cast lineup and some concept art, but that's about it. Yeah, it's cool. It's interesting. I would give this a solid B tier for sure. Next we have Rude Removal. This is that episode of Dexter's Laboratory, which is quite infamous. So I believe the story behind this one is the original episode went unaired, but you know, the censored version was eventually found. And basically it involves the characters of Dexter and Dee Dee becoming very rude, hence the title of the episode, and they basically just start swearing, which is like censored. It was meant to be censored, but I guess it was like too much, so Cartoon Network decided that the episode shouldn't air. But there were rumors that there was a uncensored like cut of the episode. And this was actually later confirmed by one of the directors on the show, who said that the original audio was recorded like uncensored. They just let the actors swear. Kind of similar to, I guess, the situation with Sailor Mouth on SpongeBob, which, don't worry, we will get to that a bit later. But yeah, it's interesting that this did end up getting found, like at least the censored version. And watching it is like kind of wild. And especially there's like these edited versions that sound very real. I don't think these aren't the real ones, I'm pretty sure, but they do sound very real. So I guess I'll give this one a solid B tier, just because there's another similar case. But yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Next we have El Apostol. I'm probably saying that wrong. But it's a 1917 film from Argentina, and it's one of the first animated films ever, I believe. Maybe the first ever, if I'm not mistaken, and the film was sadly destroyed in a fire in like the 1920s. Yeah, it was a black and white animation, and it was like a feature-length film. I think it was the first ever animated feature film. That's what it's known for. And there's not really much like known about it since it was destroyed like not long after it was created. There's like some character designs, and there's like a flyer that promoted the film, and the plot is known. It's like a political satire about the president at the time. And this one is just really sad because this is a piece of animation history that is just lost forever. So this one hurts, and the fact that it's lost forever, it's like we can't really have a search if like the only copy was destroyed. So yeah, just a sad case. I'm gonna give this one an A tier just because it's a piece of animation history and it's sadly gone forever. Hurts, but it is what it is. Next we got this really weird one that I talked about in the Lost Media Iceberg, the Christopher Columbus video game. It's not really exactly lost. Like it was never finished. I guess the build that was being created is lost because it ended up being canceled, but it was being worked on in the early 90s for the Super Famicom and was set in the late 1400s, where you play as Christopher Columbus on his journeys. And yeah, it's just a very interesting premise for a video game, especially during the time, and the fact that it was a Japanese production. It's just very, very interesting. Especially because a year earlier on the Famicom, there was another Christopher Columbus game called like Columbus Golden Dawn, which was not the same thing. This was like an RPG game, completely separate, but yeah. I might be the only person that thinks this is fascinating, but I'll give this a C tier. It's just weird, it's just funny. I just had to include it on the list. Next we have Game in the Sand. Now, I made an entire video about this pretty early on in my channel, because it's quite a mysterious short film made by the iconic and, well-known German director Werner Herzog. It was a short film made in 1964. It was about 14 minutes, it was black and white, and it's been described as something that had a controversial on-scene incident involving some sort of chicken, which has been speculated on, and he's been asked about it and if it would ever release, but the answer has pretty much always been no. It's really an interesting deep dive, I think. And it doesn't help that the only available shot from the film is pretty creepy. And the fact that, we don't know much about it. All we know is that it involved some kids and a rooster in a box or something, and it was buried in the sand. And then something crazy happened on set that led to the film never releasing, due to something, possibly graphic happening to the chicken or whatever, possibly the kids killing the chicken on accident. There's been theories about that, but it might have all just been hammed up and might just be a whole big nothing burger. But I think it's an interesting urban legend. As you guys know, I like my stuff, I like my lost media and whatnot to have some rumor to them, some myth, some urban legend. Even if it turns out to all be a hoax, I like that mysterious kind of aura. So just for that, I will give this an A tier. Now, this one, the Shrek I Feel Good animation. Before I even say anything about this, let's just put this straight into S tier, because this was a journey and a half. Quite the history behind this one. It was just found pretty recently, last year, late last year. But there was pieces of it being found all the time, and a bunch going into it. There was a bunch of screenshots, and it was quite the thing. So this was from a very early iteration of Shrek, created in 1995, back when Chris Farley was actually originally going to play Shrek. And this was an animation test for that, which had this song playing called I Got You, I Feel Good. And basically a very creepy version of Shrek, an early version, attacks this mugger guy. And yeah, that's basically the thing. It's kind of creepy, kind of not really by today's standards, but I don't know, it's very interesting. The full thing has been found and it's been uploaded to YouTube. And it's just a really cool story. People have made great videos covering the whole thing. So I won't get into too much of it here, but yeah, really good piece of lost media there. Next we have CR6, which was covered by Jorge in his documentary video on it. It's a very early lost internet show, which was way ahead of its time in many aspects, and is very interesting on its own as a sort of early web series. It was some sort of internet soap opera that involved 6 characters, but not much at all was really known about the plot. It was told through some photos along with audio dubs, and then there were interactive things with the website, I guess, but it wasn't there wasn't video with it. But the show itself isn't the most interesting thing. I think the lore behind it is, and the creator, Chris McKinstry. He ended up going into a bunch of debt during the production of this thing, and he eventually fled to Chile. And there's a whole bunch of lore behind this. I definitely recommend watching Jorge's video on the topic. It's extremely interesting. But eventually he was actually found dead, unfortunately, and there was some speculation as to what went on with that. I won't speculate too much right now, but I will say the whole case is extremely interesting. Go watch Jorge's video if you haven't seen it. I will give this an A tier. Next we have the Ed and Eddie special ed episode, which again, this is something that doesn't actually exist. It's another kind of, not exactly a hoax, but it's an unproduced piece of lost media. So not exactly lost media at all. And I know some people don't like when I call something lost media if it never existed in the first place, but I just kind of like to group the whole interesting media hoaxes, you know, found media, all that kind of stuff. I like to talk about it in the same kind of way, you know, because it's fun to speculate on if these pieces of media could ever exist. You know, like something like Saki Sanabashi, which we will get to for sure, but I don't think that exists, spoiler alert, but it does belong on the list, I think. And this is another thing like that. So this was a proposed episode of the show, I believe, and not much is known about it other than the fact that the series creator said that it was quote unquote too real. And you can speculate as to what it would have been about with the title, but yeah, there isn't much else to it other than that. But since I'm a big fan of Ed and Eddie and the title itself is just kind of strange that this would even exist at all, I was definitely interested in it, but there's not much else to it, so I will just give this a C tier. Next we have the Chucky game. What was this called again? Oh yeah, here we go. This was called Chucky Wanna Play. This was a canceled stealth action game for the PS2, I believe. Or no, this was like this. Okay, this was in 2011, 2012. So this was like Xbox 360, PS3 era. And this was, funny enough, this was basically a manhunt type game. Hilariously enough, not only was it found in 2023, but there's also, you know, footage on YouTube, and it's literally manhunt, guys. You can like walk up behind people and execute them as Chucky. Very, very interesting. Yeah, basically that's it. You just kill people as Chucky. Oh yeah, right here it says the game was found on an Xbox 360 dev kit. So yeah, it was like a 360 game. Since it's found, there's not as much mystery to it, but the fact that this was even made and that there's a working version that was found is really cool. So I will give this one a B tier. Oh, okay, I didn't know this was coming up this early. Okay, here we go. Go for a Punch, Saki Sanabashi. This one is a lot. There's a lot to be said about this one. So much so that I'm probably going to make an entire video about this at some point. I'm not sure when. But this is most likely a non-existent piece of lost media, which I've said before. I think it was included on the fake lost media iceberg, and some people were upset about that because a lot of people are still searching for this, and a lot of people still think it does. A lot of people do think it still exists, but I don't think so. And I do like, though, that people are still looking for it, and just the whole story behind it, the whole mystery, everything revolving around it, the fact that people aren't sure if it's a hoax or not, and just the way it was described and everything. It's an easy S tier for me, even though it is probably a hoax. It's just so fascinating. So basically, if you don't know the lore, a quick rundown is on some sort of forum in like the early 2000s. I can't remember if it was 4chan or Reddit or whatever, but someone described this strange Japanese animation that was possibly like an OVA or something from the 80s or 90s that was about these girls trapped inside this bathroom with no like windows or anything, and it was them like basically like themselves in very brutal ways, and just the way that the OP described it was kind of very vague about everything, to the point where it almost felt like it could be real, although it was kind of reaching in some places, I guess. It felt like very much like a creepypasta, like an urban legend, and we all know that's what I like. But you know, after years of searching, people have been searching for this thing for so long. There's been connections made. People think they found it. There was even a game made on Steam, which is pretty cool. I'll probably play that one day. But yeah, I don't think it exists personally. Some people think they found it already, but I think it's kind of a similar situation to the evil farming game, possibly. But we'll get to that. We will get to that. Yeah, I don't want to say too much. I do plan on making a video about it and doing kind of a deep dive into the whole search effort regarding it. I'm not too caught up on the lore right now myself, but yeah, it's definitely a fascinating one. Okay, now this one is celebrity number 6. So I included this here, but again, this is not even really a piece of lost media. It's more of like a mystery. I'm actually not sure why I included this, but it's fun regardless. See, I took the lost media. The term lost media is very loose in my definition. I just included a bunch of interesting internet mysteries, I guess, on here. But this concerns this image of this supposed celebrity, which was found on this like sheet with a bunch of other celebrities, and all of them were easily identifiable from certain photographs taken of said people. But this one was not easily identified. Some people think they found the person, but as of now, I don't think they have. But since this isn't technically like lost media, it's just kind of an internet mystery, I'm gonna just leave this in C tier. I guess I was kind of running out of interesting things to put on the list, so we'll just leave it there. Next we have London After Midnight, which is one of the most well-known lost media films. This was a silent film from the 1920s that starred Lon Chaney, and the film was actually very well known. And ended up being criticized quite heavily, but was met with a decent amount of viewership. And people did like Chaney as the stranger, as he was called in the film, so much so that his portrayal of this character actually would be echoed in other performances throughout Hollywood and other like monster films. It actually influenced some portrayals of Dracula in the way he would act. Like this iconic image, I mean, it reminds you a lot of those like vampire movies, right? But unfortunately, the movie was lost. And there's still a lot known about it considering how famous it was. A full synopsis exists. But the film was actually lost in a fire, most likely. The MGM fire, which happened in 1965. That was the last complete copy of the film that was thought to exist, that was most likely destroyed, which is very, very unfortunate. But yeah, not much else to say about this. Pretty interesting though. I will definitely put this in A tier. It's just so well known, I kind of have to. Also, it's a piece of film history, so yeah. And now we have the Burger King CDI game. This ended up actually being found, but these CDI games are very interesting, like the full motion video training game, like kind of niche or genre, because there's like a bunch of these I've noticed. I almost made a whole video about it. There maybe isn't enough to do a whole video, but there's like there's like that McDonald's training game. There's a Burger King one. I remember in the Lost Media Iceberg I was talking about a Kmart training game. And there's probably more, so maybe that is a topic for the future. But this one was called Burger King Operations Training, otherwise known as Burger King CDI Training Program, created in the late 90s. But yeah, it's been found. The videos are pretty basic. Yeah, it's just Burger King training from the 90s, which is a fun time capsule to exist. All Things Lost made a video on the search effort, so if you want to look into that more, there's that. But it's a C tier. I mean, it's cool, it's interesting, especially if you're interested in Burger King history, I guess. Next we have Clockman. Now, before anything, let me just put this in S tier right now, because this is one of the things that got me into Lost Media for sure. It was all of Jorge's videos, but this one specifically really got me interested. It's just a wild story. It's a very creepy Czech animated short from like the 70s, and it was, yeah. But the most interesting aspect of the search, in my opinion, and the mystery, was people describing the elements of Clockman, which it's not even called Clockman, that was just kind of what people called it. But basically, people who remembered it were describing different aspects, and some weren't lining up, some were, and it just sounded very, very creepy from their descriptions. So much so that it was kind of a Saki Sonobashi situation, where initially you'd think, yeah, this can't be real. It's just too weird. But eventually it was found. And yes, it exists, and yes, it's basically just as creepy as was described. And there's a whole history behind it. It's just very, very interesting. So S tier it goes. And before we move on here, I gotta make a few changes. Let's just put Burger King and the Ed and Eddie one in D tier, just so that we're actually using that tier, I guess. Next we have the Shrek camera thing, the commercial like product placement thing that was from all those memes. that was basically to tie in with some new HP camera or something. Oh yeah, so it was the Going in the Cringe compilation image. So yeah, just because of its meme status, this became a known case. And it's had a bit of an ongoing search, but the existence of it is actually unconfirmed according to the Lost Media Wiki article. And no footage or anything has actually surfaced of this ad existing. There's only this image and then one other from the ad, and then there's like this render thing. So it does likely exist, but there's just no proof of like the actual video of it. So maybe it was never released or whatever. But it's interesting that these images got out there and then became a template for a meme. So just for that, I will say, and because it's not found or anything, I will give this a B tier. Yeah, definitely interesting. As all Shrek related lost media is for some reason. Next we have the Evil Farming game, which is another hoax. I know, but I mean, come on guys, you know I like this kind of stuff. This was confirmed to be false, and the reason behind it was quite the tale. Basically, a streamer by the name of Vinesauce Joel, I believe, actually like made the whole thing up, and it led to this insane goose chase, like an absolute wild goose chase. A bunch of YouTubers talking about it. You know, Wang had this whole series on it. And yeah, the premise was again kind of like Saki Sanobashi. It sounds like an absolutely ridiculous concept. You play as like a farmer who ends up killing his wife and trying to hide the body from the police and such, which, I mean, it could exist, but and that's kind of what fueled this investigation. It ended up on Tip of My Joystick, but the guy who made the original post confirmed that he heard it from like Joel talking in the middle of a stream. But yeah, the whole saga is just very hilarious and interesting, and this is also being made into a real game on Steam, so I look forward to that. But since it's not a real piece of lost media, I can't rate it too high, even though I already have some of these. But I will give it I'll give it a B tier, because it's kind of related. It's kind of a similar situation to Saki Sanobashi, although, you know, that hasn't been confirmed to be a hoax, I guess. But yeah, okay, so now we have Max Headroom. As some of you probably know, I did a video on this. A lot of people have done videos on this. It's a very infamous television hijacking that took place in 1987 by a man and possibly multiple accomplices wearing a Max Headroom mask. And they were never caught. They hijacked, I believe, 2 different stations. One was during a football game. And the transmissions were very interesting, to say the least. But yeah, they were never found, and there was allegedly some lost audio, because in the first transmission, you actually can't hear anything. So it's likely that they were actually recording something for audio, but we just never got to hear it. And since these guys have never been caught, I doubt that's ever going to be found, and it's unconfirmed if it even exists. But since it's such an interesting case, I had to include it. The real story is more interesting than that, like, sort of random piece of lost media, I guess. So I'll just put it in C tier, even though the actual case itself is very interesting, and I definitely encourage you to look into it. I do have that video, if you know. Yeah, okay. Now what is this again? Oh yeah, how could I forget? The Apollo 11 master tape footage from the moon landing. This is one of the most important pieces of lost media ever, I would say, considering it's one of mankind's greatest achievements, and it's such a huge, you know, worldwide event. And it's kind of hilarious that they basically overwrote the original footage, possibly. That's like the theory for what happened, because they had this really primitive way of recording the screen, and then eventually the master tapes were overwritten with other footage because they were like reusing tapes. It was a pretty wild situation, and because of that, people have made a lot of conspiracies due to that. So yeah. There's still footage that exists, just not the master tape footage. We just have that boomer like recording of with the camera, which is super low quality. So yeah. Since it's like a very important piece in human history, I have to put it high up here. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Yeah, I think that's good for now. So now we have Jeff the Killer. This has recently become a very big thing. And yes, I'm going to put it over the moon landing because that's how I roll. So let's talk about Jeff the Killer. Now, first of all, a very big part of my childhood and very nostalgic. And this is definitely the most interesting of all the creepypasta lost media that exists. Basically, people are looking for the unedited photo of this, which I'm sure all of you have seen if you've ever even heard the words Jeff the Killer. And it goes deep, you know, into old Japanese forums and theories about it being a certain person. There was allegedly this one about this woman who apparently like committed, but that turned out to be false. And then there were further investigations which tied into other people. And there's a lot more to it. And there's been a lot of recent sort of discoveries. I'm not too caught up on the recent stuff, so I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know the original photo has not been found as of yet. But yeah, and there's like that Mudahar bounty for the image, so there's other people very interested in it, obviously, and it's been covered by a ton of other channels like Gamer from Mars and Jorge as well. So yeah, I would say it's an S tier. It's just fascinating, and it's one of those ones in recent times that has gotten a lot of attention outside of the lost media community. Next we have Absolutely Disgusting. This is one that Sewer talked about, which brought it to my attention. Shout out to him. Yeah, it's from a news broadcast that took place in 2005 for some local news station, and we don't really know exactly what it's related to, which, well, hence the mystery, I guess, right? We just see a reporter there standing in front of some homes, and then the words "absolutely disgusting." So people are like, okay, what is this guy talking about? And there's been a lot of digging into this, but I mean, they just have not found what was being talked about here. They did find the man in the image, I believe, the news reporter, but the broadcast here was just never found. There's another image possibly related to this from the same channel with a guy named James Dean, and it says offended. But yeah, for just one image to have so much intrigue and mystery is pretty crazy. I'm sorry for saying so much, guys. I'm not used to this live recording with no script, by the way. I do apologize. And don't worry, we're going to go back to the more edited stuff. Just had to get this out between other bigger projects I was working on and sponsors. But okay, so Absolutely Disgusting. This is going to go in A tier, and I'm putting so much stuff up here, but yeah, I'm gonna have to balance this out later probably. Okay, now we have Cracks, also known as Crack Master, this Sesame Street short from the 70s, and there's quite a bit of Sesame Street stuff on here, but this is the most interesting, I think, and this was another one that was eventually found, and it actually aired for quite a while, for like 5 years or something, and then abruptly stopped airing in like 1980, and basically after it disappeared, it became lost for a short time, at which point people began looking for it because you know, the synopsis that people had was quite interesting and, you know, kind of creepy, to be honest. Similar, I guess you could say, to the Clockman thing. But eventually it was found in December of 2013, after a long and storied search, mind you. But the founder of the Lost Media Wiki, actually, Daike, received a copy, and since then it's been available in both English and Spanish. And I think a few other languages. But yes, very interesting in terms of Sesame Street Lost Media. I will definitely give this an A tier. Next we have Conquer 64 12 Tales. Okay, so the story behind this one is pretty interesting. This is a lost early build of the N64 game Conker's Bad Fur Day, which was known as Conker's Quest, also 12 Tales Conquer 64, and Rare was actually kind of aiming for a Banjo-Kazooie-like, you know, kid-friendly 3D platformer. So that's what kind of makes this really interesting, is Conker's Bad Fur Day was actually a kid's game at one point. And there is actually footage of this, about 30 minutes of footage, and then there's like the game's intro. But the actual build itself is lost, and it's mostly the gimmick that's kind of interesting. In terms of gameplay, it's relatively similar. You know, it's a platformer by Rare for the N64. There isn't that much variation, but the fact that they made it such an edgy game because of people criticizing their kid-friendly projects like Banjo-Kazooie, it's just funny to me. The gimmick behind it is just kind of, yeah, I like that. So we'll put that in B tier for sure. Okay, this is one that nobody ever talks about. That personally is very interesting to me because I'm a big fan of The Sopranos and I'm a big fan of basketball. So basically, the story is James Gandolfini and his co-star Eddie Falco, who plays Carmelo Soprano, and he obviously plays, you know, Tony Soprano, one of the most iconic TV characters of all time. Basically, they came together to create a Sopranos short film to hopefully entice LeBron to join the New York Knicks. And this was in 2010, so LeBron became a free agent, and his contract with the Cavs, the Cleveland Cavaliers, it had ended, and he was trying to get him to join the Knicks, even going out of his way to make this short film, which didn't work, and we obviously have never seen, and unfortunately, it's, you know, it's basically a sequel to The Sopranos that we never got to see. Obviously, it's not canon or anything, but yeah, I really would be interested in seeing this. Like, this is definitely, I think I've mentioned before, but this is in my list of most wanted pieces of lost media, even if it's nothing, you know, huge. I'm just a big fan of this, of The Sopranos, and obviously, James Gandolfini, he died shortly after, so we didn't get much in the way of additional, like, Tony Soprano stuff. So yeah, I would just love to see this. So for me, this is an easy, I want to say S tier, but you know, not a lot of people think it's as interesting as me, so I'm just gonna put it in A tier for now. I don't want to put too much stuff in S tier. Oh, I didn't even know I included this, to be honest. Okay, so we got the Kmart thing. I guess I'll just go ahead and put this in D tier. Yeah, it's kind of a similar situation to the Burger King thing, like I said. There's not really much evidence for it other than, you know, there's like a forum post discussing it, which I covered in the iceberg. But yeah, I guess we'll just leave it at that. Now, what is this? I'm trying to remember. Okay, yeah, so this is The Cure for Insomnia. This was like one of the longest movies of all time. Supposedly, it was an experimental like film made in the 80s. Apparently it's 87 hours long. Okay, yeah, so it says at the time it was recognized as the longest film ever created by the Guinness Book of World Records. Yeah, apparently it was spliced with photography, but basically it was like an art project, and they had like narration and stuff going on. It was apparently very weird. But it doesn't seem like you can really find anything on this. It's kind of obscure. I mean, there's a couple reviews of it, of people supposedly seeing the film, but there's not much else to it. It's an interesting gimmick, but since there's not much known, I guess I'll just leave it in D tier for now. Definitely an interesting concept. The fact that it could be like one of the longest films ever made. But I guess we'll just leave it at that since there's not that much to go on. Oh, now here we go. Now, this is the McDonald's training game. And don't worry, this one won't go in D tier. I won't put all of them in there. This one is the most interesting for sure. I'll go ahead and give it B tier because there's more of a story behind this one. It was discovered by another YouTuber, Nick Robinson. There's a whole 10-year long search or something with this. He even made an iceberg video I'm seeing right here. So yeah, okay. And it was a DS game, interestingly enough. And it was made for Japanese McDonald's employees. And he posted the full playthrough of the game, and it's not just like a full motion video thing, it's an actual game. So it's a lot more interesting than the other ones. So we'll just leave it there. Okay, next we have the Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Okay, yeah, this one is probably another one that's only interesting to me and maybe a couple other people. But again, it's another kind of gimmick thing. It's like a lost build of a canceled game. But the whole funny part of it is it was originally planned as a horror-themed spin-off of Raving Rabbids, basically the equivalent of like the Minions of gaming. And I actually like the Rabbids. I had the Rayman Raving Rabbids for the 360 growing up. And I love that game. Very nostalgic. But this is kind of hilarious though. That it was actually like horror themed, right? And it was like some sort of first person shooter or something. Which would have like 4-player co-op. So it's like a Left 4 Dead kind of situation. It sounded like. But the game ended up getting canceled, and even before that, it shifted to something else. There was that trailer they dropped at E3 2011, and it was changed to Killer Freaks from Outer Space. But yeah. So besides that, there isn't much to it. But I just thought it was kind of funny. So we'll put that in C tier. Next we have Batman Fights Dracula. Okay, so this is one of those unlicensed, like unofficial fan films. And I actually do like these. I did a video, it was a very different video for my channel, just with my friend. We were watching the Mario vs. Goku movie, and that was really fun. So this is kind of similar to that, but we have a Batman fighting Dracula, which compared to Mario fighting Goku is honestly not that crazy. This was apparently one from the 60s. It was a Filipino film. But there isn't much in terms of details out there. There is this theatrical poster, and there's like a few screenshots, but no footage as far as I know. But yeah, and they have like a little plot synopsis. But that's kind of it. So I guess I'll give this a D tier. I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong, but it's no Mario vs. Goku. I'll just say that. And it's definitely no Food Fight, which is the next thing on this list. So Food Fight. This is a film, again, not... the film itself isn't that interesting. I mean, it kind of is because it has such, like, negative reception. But the story behind it is really what's interesting. The fact that there's, like, an early version that was supposed to be released earlier, and then there was, like, this production hell, and then someone allegedly stole the hard drive with the only copy, and they had to remake everything from scratch. I mean, there's a bunch of drama with this one, and then there's also the fact that the film looks really, really bad. And then there's been a lot of people talking about this for years, so everyone knows about Food Fight. Yeah. So where should we put this though? I mean, gosh, I know I'm putting so much stuff in A tier, but everyone knows about it. I kind of have to put it up there. Next, we have the Playboy Channel Religious Message. Yeah, so this was another TV hijacking from the 80s. A really interesting incident. Maybe something I'll look into for a video later on. But for now, this one doesn't have as much details. There was this alleged photo of the message on screen. And there's a little bit more to the case, but there's like no footage or anything, so not too much to delve into there. But again, is something that happened in 1987. But yeah, for this, it's definitely not as interesting though as like Max Headroom or something. Not as much to go on. I guess I'll just put this in we'll put this in C tier, because if there is footage of this, it would make it a lot more interesting. But yeah, okay. And then speaking of, okay, we have the Handy Mandy porn incident. El Supersonic Cube, he made a video about this. Again, there's no recording as far as I know, but it was claimed that an episode of the show was actually like hijacked, and a bunch of like pornography was shown for several minutes before it was taken down. Quite a crazy story, to be honest, but since there's no like footage or anything to prove it, it's kind of like, whatever. But it's a very interesting story, so we at least have to put it in C tier. Okay, so next we have Waluigi's Toenail Clipping Party. When I discovered this on the Lost Media Iceberg, I think that's where I first saw this, I didn't even believe this thing was real. But yes, it is. It's a lost Nintendo Flash game where you clip Waluigi's toenails. It's so disgusting. Apparently it was made in promotion for like an N64 game, and there's like articles talking about it, but yeah, the game is lost, unfortunately. But it just sounds so crazy. It's so interesting. Where do we put it? I'm gonna put it at least in B tier, because it's just yeah. It's a why does this exist sort of situation. Okay, next we have the Game of Thrones pilot. Easy S tier for me. Game of Thrones, just one of my favorite shows of all time, despite the last few seasons being pretty lackluster to say the least. But season 1, and especially like episode 1, for all that crazy stuff that David Benioff and DB Weiss said about, like the production being crazy and them not really knowing what they were doing, they made a great first episode. Even though, the finale was bad and all that, the first episode of the show is amazing. But they've said in multiple interviews that there was an original pilot that was kind of bad, that, didn't review well with their friends and family. Like, people didn't know really what was going on. They didn't know about Cersei and Jaime, that they didn't know that they were like brother and sister. So yeah, I would definitely be very interested in that. Also, I'm pretty sure there was a cameo with George R.R. Martin, if you don't know, the writer of the book series that, the show's based on. So yeah, easy S tier for me. Next we have Frogmen. This is very interesting. So this was actually a pilot movie from 1994 that was going to be released on NBC for like an action series they were intending on producing, that was actually going to star a bunch of like Navy SEALs doing like secret covert ops type situation, but the main thing that was notable is that O.J. Simpson was going to be the leader of the team in this show, and I'm guessing what ended up happening with that. It was never aired due to his arrest and his very public trial and all that, but it actually gets even crazier than that, because people were trying to dig into like the footage from like this pilot that they shot, because O.J. Simpson actually had like knife training as a part of this like film project, and both his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and another man named Ronald Goldman were found stabbed to death. So they thought this could somehow be related to that, which is just wild. And the film actually made it into trial, but they entered the tape into evidence, but it was never actually used, although the police department did end up looking into it, and there's actually a photo from the knife scene, but they found that nothing could be interpreted as incriminating in any way. And then besides that, there's like a cast photo, and then there's like some behind the scenes, but the actual episode itself has never been released and probably never will be. But it's a very interesting story. Basically everything outside of the actual piece of media itself. So I'll give that an A tier because it's just a crazy story. Next we have Freaky Flickers, Quest for the Golden Flicker. This is kind of just a weird like CGI film based on like an obscure toy line. It's nothing too crazy. There's like partially found scenes. The film kind of looks weird. If I remember right, there was the film like was stolen also, like a similar situation. But besides that, yeah, it's kind of whatever. The reason I have it on here is mostly because from my memory, it was like one of the first pieces of lost media I ever heard about. So, there's that like nostalgia factor about it. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting with the stolen hard drive stuff and whatnot. I'll give it a B tier. Next we have Falling. So this is like an independent film, which was like a Mormon movie actually, right? And basically it became involved in a lawsuit with the creator claiming that Nightcrawler actually copied his movie, which is very interesting. The one with Jake Gyllenhaal, that they like plagiarized his film, as it involves like kind of similar things, like with the filming violent crime scenes and whatnot for TV. But the case ended up being dropped, and there is a trailer, but the movie itself is still lost for whatever reason. And it even had like a DVD release, if I remember right. But yeah, it's still lost to this day. Still kind of interesting, more so because it's related to that Jake Gyllenhaal Nightcrawler drama. But I'll put it in C tier. Next we have, Pink Morning Cartoon. This is another one that Jorge covered, and another very interesting mystery. Again, the show isn't actually called Pink Morning Cartoon. That was just the name of it when people started like talking about it. It's actually TV8 Kids Fun Festival, and it was discovered to be an animated children's show that aired on like a local station in Ohio. And yeah, the Ohio jokes. Okay, I already know. And it was produced in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And yeah, it just has a really interesting history, and the cartoon itself is very creepy. So there's that. And it's only partially found to this day. So where do we put that on the list? Just for the pure mystique of it all and the creepiness factor, I will also give it an A tier. I know I'm giving a lot of A tiers, but here Next we have the Lost Lincoln speech. So yes, another very important piece of like historical lost media. So this was a speech given by President Abraham Lincoln on May 29th, 1856 in Illinois. And it is lost, supposedly, the legend goes, because it was just such an engaging and great speech that the people watching didn't actually take notes. And it's thought to have been a condemnation on slavery and one of the best speeches ever written, despite nobody actually having the full thing. There are no actual transcripts of the official speech, there are only summaries that exist at this point. But being from such an important individual at such, an important time in history and being a legendary figure, it's definitely important, but there's not really much to go on with this. I mean, it's probably never going to be found. So, I guess B tier? I mean, I don't know. I said it's insulting to put Abraham Lincoln's speech in B tier. I mean, there's just not much to really say about it. It's cool though. Call of Duty Vietnam is next, which was internally called Fog of War, supposedly, and was, just another Call of Duty installment, which was planned to take place in Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and was being developed by Sledgehammer Games at some point. It was actually going to be third person, most likely, which is definitely different for Call of Duty. Obviously both Modern Warfare 2s had like third person modes, but the full thing being, third person would have been very different. It had almost a year of development, and they had allegedly 15 minutes of playable gameplay, but eventually the game ended up being canceled, and Sledgehammer was made to help Infinity Ward with Modern Warfare 3. The original one, the good one, not the new one. So yeah, but those 15 minutes of gameplay, any builds or anything, have been lost. And being a huge Call of Duty fan, it definitely upsets me, and it's still interesting, but I will put that in B tier. Okay, so now we got Toon news. These were some CGI shorts that were released on Toon Disney, and they're pretty just kind of whatever. I mean, they're not that interesting personally. I was a pretty big fan of Toontown back in the day when I was like a little kid. I played a bit of Toontown, but yeah, some of the episodes are actually found, quite a decent amount actually, I think from season 1, but most from season 2 are apparently lost. They're pretty like short episodes, right? They're like 5-minute long episodes, and I think there were 26 of them in total or something like that. But yeah, not too much else to say about that. I'm gonna put that in D tier just because, they're just, it is what it is, I guess. Then we got the Kurt Cobain Ren and Stimpy song. So I've talked about this like 1,000 times on this channel, but this was a supposed song that Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of Nirvana, made because he was such a huge fan of Ren and Stimpy. That ended up being rejected and like thrown out because he wasn't well known at the time, allegedly. That's how the story goes, and I believe this was like said by a voice actor on a podcast or something, but the song never like surfaced, and it seems like the whole thing was honestly just made up because there's really no evidence as to its existence, so it's possible it was never even a real thing to begin with, but it's an interesting urban legend at the very least, so I will put that in C tier, I suppose. Okay, so now we have Hidogata. This is one of the biggest urban legends in the lost media community again. This is something that's unconfirmed to even exist, but it's a very interesting Japanese urban legend. Regarding a creepy piece of media involving 2 white humanoid figures on like train tracks, And there's a bunch that went into this. A lot of people thought they found it. There's things that are similar. There's like conflicting reports about the actual video, you know, what it is, what it's about. You know, there's an on the hunt flyer that the Lost Media Wiki made, and a bunch of people are still searching for it. And of course there's the recreation videos of what it might have been like. But does it actually exist? I'm not entirely sure, but I wouldn't discount it like I would Saki Sanobashi, which I think is actually a hoax. With this, it's uncertain to be sure, but it does kind of sound like a creepypasta based on the original thread, but there have been other things that sounded like creepypastas that turned out to be true. But it is very, very interesting, so I'm going to give that an S tier, and it's an ongoing mystery, so why not, I guess. Okay, next we have the JBVO Dragon Ball Z broadcast. Honestly, this is another case of like before it was found, it was more interesting. But when it was found, we did a cool little watch party. We had a bunch of Lost Media YouTubers in there and we reacted to it. But I'm not gonna lie, it was a little like disappointing. I don't really know what I was expecting, but it was pretty short. But it is a cool find nonetheless. Like, it really is, I can't lie. Johnny Bravo narrating over an episode of Dragon Ball Z, despite it being sped up, was something I think I needed to see and hear. But yeah, now that it's found, there's not as much mystery to it. Again, it's still a cool piece of found media, don't get me wrong. But we're gonna go ahead and just put that in B tier, I think. Next we have Heist. So this was actually an interesting canceled game. So this is talking about like the lost builds, right? Basically it took place in 1969 in San Francisco, where the player would plan and do like different heists. And it's very interesting because this predates GTA 5, and yet it's basically the same kind of game, like same story and everything. Like, you control 3 main characters, which each all have different abilities, and you go around doing heists in California. So yeah, literally GTA 5. And there's a couple trailers and like some artwork, but that's about it. But just for that gimmick alone, it goes up here to, I would say B tier, because we're probably never gonna like actually see the builds of this game, but it's an interesting concept, so we'll leave it there. Next we have Him. This is quite an infamous piece of Lost Media because it's a lost gay film about Jesus. Yeah. So it was made in like the 70s, and it was shown a few times, but as of now, no footage has been recovered. And yeah, there's like a couple screenshots, some ads, but due to its controversial nature, it has not resurfaced. But just off that premise alone, it goes up here. Yeah, just very, very interesting premise, I gotta say. I'll leave it in B tier, I guess. Next we have Crybaby Lane. This was another one of those cases where it sounds fake, it sounds like a creepypasta when you hear about it, but it was real and it ended up being found. So this was a Nickelodeon TV horror film which aired in late 2000, and it's about like these kids who conduct a seance in a graveyard, and they basically summon the soul of some evil demon or something. And yeah, there was some like other disturbing scenes that people recounted, and it didn't really sound real, but yeah, it all ended up being true because the film was found in like 2011, so it was missing for a good, you know, while. But yeah, the whole thing is available on YouTube. Yeah, definitely up there due to the creepiness factor, I guess. We'll give it an A tier. Next we have the Hannah Montana anime. This is just based on the concept alone and the fact that it was being allegedly developed by Toei Animation. Guys, these are the people that did Dragon Ball, okay, and One Piece. Some of the biggest anime ever conceived, right? So it's pretty wild. It was obviously canceled, and there's not really any footage to be found, but the article on the Lost Media Wiki is more so pertaining to like lost production materials, you know, for whatever they had. But none of it has ever really resurfaced. It's mostly just conjecture on what this project really entailed. We don't know much about it. but just based on the premise, again, it's very fascinating. I'm gonna give it a B tier. Next, we have the cruel version of Air, another lost media urban legend related to a Japanese visual novel. And this is in regards to a creepy version of the game called Cruel Air. Basically, the story goes that it was made by like an unidentified group, and was found in like stores in Japan, and it added a bunch of really creepy elements to the game. But yeah, as far as we know, it's an urban legend. There's like a couple of screenshots, but mostly seems like it's fake. But this is the type of stuff I love. Come on. So I guess you know, there's not much to it other than that. I'll give it a B tier. Why not? Next, we have Greed. This is referring to the 8-hour cut of the film. This is already a very well-regarded silent film, but there is an 8-hour cut of it that is lost, which is very long for a movie, but especially during the time it was made. This was the 1920s, and it was said to be around 8 hours long and ran between 42 and 47 film reels, which, to put it in perspective, it was cut down to about 4 hours or 24 reels, which is already very long. But the people who did say they viewed the film said it was basically the holy grail of movies and was one of the greatest films of all time, if not the greatest. And there were copies of this original film allegedly out there, but none have been found today. And because it was from the silent era, it's likely we'll never actually see the movie, unfortunately. Like, we could be missing out on one of the greatest movies of all time. We still have the 4-hour cut, but yeah, not the full thing. I'm gonna put this in A tier just because it's an important piece of film history as well as an interesting story. And again, we have another film here. We have The Day the Clown Cried, a movie I talked about a decent amount. I made a whole video about it. And funnily enough, the film is said to be lost until this year, 2024, because the creator of the film, Jerry Lewis, has stated that there was a stipulation when he submitted his copy to the Library of Congress that it not be screened until June 2024. So that date is actually approaching, so we may be able to see this lost film this year. But the reason this unreleased and unfinished film is so controversial and why it's lost today is because of the subject matter, as it involved a clown played by Jerry Lewis who is like performing these acts and acting goofy in front of Jews in the concentration camps that were about to be executed. So yeah, it's pretty dark subject matter. And for that to be made a comedy in the 70s, yeah, it didn't go over well. And basically, the film was never finished. Still, if it does release this year, or if they do a showing of it and it becomes available, I'll definitely check it out. So for now, I give it an A tier. I mean, it's an interesting movie with quite a history too. There's like documentaries. I think there's a German documentary on it. And then, of course, a bunch of the Lost Media YouTubers, including myself, made videos about it. So that's that. Now we have the Nicktoons Get Zombified bumpers. These are really interesting. They're, again, these creepypasta-like little animation bumpers that don't sound real when you hear like a description of them, but they actually are. At least some of them are. Some have not been found, but a few of them have, and they're pretty cool. And some are like urban legend. We don't know if they're actually real or not, but a few of them have been found. So I will put this in A tier. I like these. Next, we have Sailor Mouth. A similar situation to that of the Rude Removal episode. This is a SpongeBob episode that first aired in 2001 and was controversial because the characters were swearing, although it was like censored. And it was thought that the voice actors actually did swear to make it easier instead of having to use like substitute words. The voice actor for SpongeBob, Tom Kenny, actually admitted this, that they would actually swear and then just edit it out. But the uncensored version has not resurfaced, although there are clips. Like there's this video right here, the SpongeBob voice actors cursing compilation. So if you want to hear something at least close to it, I guess you have that. But it's pretty much the same thing as a Rude Removal, so I'm gonna just put it in B tier, I guess. Next we have another Sesame Street one, the Wicked Witch episode, also known as episode 847. This was one of the most controversial episodes of the show, which is why it ended up getting lost, because it received a ton of complaints, mostly from angry parents who said their kids were traumatized after seeing the episode, mostly I guess due to the appearance of the Wicked Witch, who was the center focus of the episode, obviously, because it was a crossover between this and The Wizard of Oz from the 1939 film, right? And this was like a holy grail of lost media, and it wasn't found until 2022. So yeah, people have been talking about this for years. I don't believe it aired after it had all that negative reception and was pulled from air initially. So yeah, it was missing for quite a while and is one of the most infamous pieces of Sesame Street lost media, along with another episode, which we'll talk about soon. But yeah, not the biggest Sesame Street guy, so I don't know all that much about it. But you know, a lot of people were very interested in this one. I will put it in A tier. Definitely a classic one. Next we have the Toy Story Black Friday reel. So this is quite notorious. Basically, this is a very early rough cut of the film, which is very different from what we know today as Toy Story. It's a lot more cynical and it's a lot edgier, right? And this was just felt a lot less like a kid's production, and a lot of this ended up being changed. So the only footage we actually have is a 2-minute sample, which was included in a Blu-ray feature, I believe, and it shows like an alternate version of a scene that they had, and there's only like a couple images besides this, but they also talk about it a bit. Yeah, it's just very, very interesting. Like, Woody was a lot edgier of a character and a lot less redeemable of a character, and it's just very interesting. But there isn't much else in terms of material with this, you know, because eventually they ended up just making the Toy Story we know now. But I will put this, it's very interesting, but there isn't that much to it besides that, so I'm gonna just put it in B tier, I guess. Next we have Shli Nieko. I have no idea how to pronounce this still to this day, but it's a children's TV series from the 70s and 80s, and it was made in Czechoslovakia, and it ended up gaining notoriety because it's pretty creepy, and Jorge has talked about this before, and yeah, it's just kind of creepy. That basically sums it up. But and not all the episodes are found. It's only partially found, it says here on the Lost Media Wiki. I don't know too much else about it. I believe I've talked about it before though. So I'm going to put this in C tier, I guess. Yeah, it's just a creepy puppet show. Next we have the Taxi Driver game. I'm a big fan of Taxi Driver, one of my favorite movies of all time. This was kind of a strange thing though. They were making like a sequel game sort of thing, and it was going to be released for the PS2 and Xbox, and a lot actually came out from this game. Like there's actual gameplay of it, and it looks very interesting, but it sadly ended up getting canceled. Yeah, but there is no build or anything. It definitely has that Grand Theft Auto inspired look and feel to it, but it's not really something that you would think would be, this is not the movie to make into a video game, I should say, especially since this is a movie from the 70s and they randomly decided they're gonna make like a sequel video game. It's kind of random, to be honest. And apparently like Robert De Niro was even gonna reprise his role as the protagonist, Travis Bickle, and do voiceover for it. But yeah, there were like financial issues with the company and it just never came out. So it's very interesting as a fan of Taxi Driver, so I have to put this in A tier, especially since there's gameplay and it just looks very interesting. So next we have the other Sesame Street episode, Snuffy's parents get a divorce. This was originally going to air in the 90s, but was pulled before airing because it had like negative test screenings. But and this is something that isn't fully found, if I remember correct. We only have some footage, and yeah, this was like, as the title kind of suggests, it deals with the topic of divorce, which, yeah, it's something I guess parents weren't ready for their kids to hear in Sesame Street. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I'm gonna put that in B tier because we got a lot of Sesame Street stuff, and I want to get through this video as soon as possible. This recording's already going over an hour. Okay, so now we have Food Dude. Okay, so this is a pretty obscure, unreleased CDI game, and there isn't that much known about it. It was apparently like a skating game where you dodge junk food or something. It's pretty strange. There was this article I found about unreleased games, and Food Dude comes up, and there is a bunch of stuff here actually. So yeah, there's like a bunch of strange sculptures they made, and there's only one screenshot of the actual game. There's no footage or anything, and you know, no builds to speak of, obviously. And yeah, the project just didn't pan out. It ended up getting canceled, so there really isn't much to this one. It's just kind of a strange thing that I thought was funny in the Lost Media iceberg, I believe. So I'm gonna just put that in C tier. Just a strange kind of thing, I guess. Next we have Save from the Titanic. This is a pretty wild lost silent film because this was like a month after the Titanic like tragedy, right, in real life. They were trying to make a movie like a month later, which is absolutely wild, right? Like a lot of the stuff here was fictionalized, but they were like bringing on a lot of real survivors from the incident. And yeah, it was just, yeah, very, very interesting that they were trying to cash out that quickly with this. And the film actually ended up being destroyed in a fire like a couple years later. And that was most likely the last copy of the film. So yeah, unfortunately, it seems like this one is gone for good. The first ever film of the Titanic we will probably never see again. And it was probably pretty accurate, despite them trying to cash in on a tragedy like this. Hopefully some of the details were at least correct, and hopefully they consulted with real survivors. But I guess we'll never know. So I'm gonna put this in B tier. That's definitely interesting piece of cinema history for sure. Next we have, I think this is the Ring Brussels cut. And this is an unconfirmed thing to even exist, but basically it was said to be a much like scarier, more graphic cut of the film, but it has never surfaced, and it's a bit of an urban legend. And you know, I like my urban legends, but there's not really much to it other than that. I guess we'll put that in C tier because there's really not much else to it other than that. Next we have Star Wars 1313. And I'm not that like big of a Star Wars fan, but this game sounded really, really cool, and it's sad that this was canceled. Basically, this is talking about an unreleased build of the game because we do have a lot of demo footage, including gameplay where you like play as Boba Fett. Apparently, it was going to be like this false protagonist situation where you play as a guy and he ends up dying or something, and then you end up playing as Boba Fett, which sounds like a really cool concept. And apparently, it was going to be like a mature title. It wasn't going to be like a kid's game or anything like that, which I think is definitely interesting and can work with the Star Wars universe. And I hope they do actually pursue something like this in the future. But it seems that we're never going to see this ever, sadly. But it sounds really, really cool. So I'm going to put that in A tier. That just sounds really interesting to me. Next we have the Superman 1933. This is the lost first version of Superman, I believe. Yeah, and if you haven't heard this origin story, it's pretty wild. Basically, in this version, Superman is actually a villain, which, by today's standards, I guess making a comic book about like a villain superhero isn't that crazy. We have The Boys and Invincible and all this other stuff, but for 1930, that's a pretty interesting concept. It was called like the Reign of Superman, but all we have now is the cover. We actually don't have the actual comic itself, and eventually it was obviously changed and he became just a generic superhero. But I think this is really interesting, and I would like to see the real pages, but likely it's never gonna happen, unfortunately. Cool piece of comic book history though, for sure. That's an A tier, and I'm not even a DC guy like that. Okay, now we have the Mickey Mouse tape. Okay, just for the pure gimmick of it all, even though it probably might not even exist, and even if it does, we'll probably never see it. Just the story itself is hilarious. I have to give it an A tier. It's fascinating. Basically, the story goes that like during Walt's birthday, these animators animated this short of Mickey and Minnie having sex, and he like laughed at it and was like, okay, who made this, you know? And then eventually they admitted it, and then he just fired them and then had all the copies destroyed. That's how the story goes. Did it actually happen? Like, I don't know, probably not, but it's a very funny urban legend. So now we have Kablam episode 29. This again is another probably non-existent thing. Yeah, this is a hoax, right? This is a hoaxed final episode that's never actually came out. Basically, a lot of people thought this was real though, because it appeared on various episode guides on the internet, and but the creator of the show actually debunked it. But there was like a whole fake plot synopsis and everything, and it was like kind of like a fake ending to the story. But it's not real, and I don't know too much about the show, so I will give it a C tier. I mean, it's, you know, it's an interesting lost media hoax, but apparently I put a lot of those on here. Next we have Eagle Sam. This is kind of an obscure anime series that I included just because I thought it was interesting, because it stars Sam, who's basically like an 80s Olympics mascot that people in Japan really liked. You know, he's like this cute little eagle guy, and yeah, that's basically it. A couple episodes have been found, but most are lost, and that's really all there is to that. I will put that in C tier. And we only got a few more here. We got Halo DS. I'm a huge Halo fan. I think I've talked about it a few times. I did Lasso on all the Halo games except for Halo 5, but maybe in the future. Probably a lot of you don't even know what that means. Anyway, yeah, so this was like a lost, strange tech demo that they made, that was revealed on IGN. Basically, a weird unlicensed version of Halo made for the DS that never actually got to any like publisher or anything. But the fact that it even existed at all, with, you know, the gameplay shown, like the pitch itself, is pretty interesting, and I would have liked to see Halo on the DS. So just because I'm a big Halo fan, we gotta put it in B tier. Gotta let that bias come out, because why not? And now for the final one, we have Me and My Friends, also known as the Backyardigans. Right? This is the pilot for the Backyardigans, the live action one. That is lost, and this has gone through quite the search. One of the most storied searches, I guess, in lost media, at least in the modern age, I suppose. You know, I know Sewer made a bunch of videos about this, but yeah. Basically, this was the live action version of the show with this pilot that ended up being declined by Nickelodeon, and then it was made into the animated series. There are a lot of images and a very short clip and some behind the scenes stuff, but that's really all we have. But, you know, since so many people are interested and searching for this, I have to bump it up on the list. So we are going to put it in A tier. And I guess that does it for the video. This is kind of the tier list. Yeah. Again, if you want a more scripted deep dive into these entries and more, and you somehow haven't seen it yet, you can check out my Lost Media Iceberg. Don't be intimidated, it's only 10 hours long. But yeah, sorry for this little random kind of slop video, but yeah, I'm going on vacation soon, and I just needed something to kind of throw out between other projects, like I said. But yeah, I guess that'll be it from me. Let me know if you agree or disagree with the placements here, and let me know your favorite pieces of lost media, especially ones not included in this short list. And yeah, that'll do it for this random tier list video, I guess. It's been me, sourcebrew, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, and peace out.